From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Speaking with the Enemy.
Yes, the show is called Speaking with the Enemy Free Agency Edition. I'm your host, Louie B, and today very pleased to be focused on the Calgary Stampeders as we're joined by Jock Wilson. And Jock, I mean, the Stamps have certainly been busy in January, right up until this week with the big signing in Kadeem Carey.
Yeah, no, it's there's lots of optimism in the city of Calgary, without a doubt. John Hufnagel has always been about taking care of his own house, taking care of his own players first. We'll see if he is active on next Tuesday. I really don't know, because it's one of those situations. What did the Calgary Stampeders have to do? They had to take care of their most outstanding player. They did that with Kadeem Carey. They had to take care of their offensive line. They did that with Julian Good-Jones and Sean McEwen and Ryan Sevier and Zach Williams. They obviously signed Derek Dennis as well on the free agent market. So I think that was important. And then early in the process, they took care of their two big players that returned from the NFL late last season. Receiver Reggie Begelton, that was a big one. Trey Roberson was a big one. And then you look at the defensive line, and, a lot of people thought the Calgary Stampeders were a competitive team at the end of last season because of their defensive line play of guys like Mike Rose and Derek Wiegand. Flo Orimolade, he got injured early in the process, but he is re-signed. So I think that's really important. And then, of course, to cap it all off, you had to look at the linebacking core. The re-signing of Jameer Thurman was another big one. I'm not sure that Darnell Sankey, the leading tackler in the Canadian Football League, is going to come back to the Calgary Stampeders. Fingers crossed on that one, but that's a big piece of business. The other big piece of business for the Calgary Stampeders is their secondary. They spent a lot of money in the secondary last season. They were disappointed at times. They were happy at times. They do have Trey Roberson coming back, but you look at that starting secondary from last season, there's a lot of players that are still unsigned.
I want to get your thoughts on Jake Mayer, because I'm sure he was somebody who probably would have gotten a lot of interest in the open market, but the Stampeders took care of him back on December 31st. What do you make of that and that kind of dynamic at QB right now for Calgary?
Yeah, would there have been a lot of interest in the open market? Yes, but not as a starting quarterback, because he's got 3 games under his belt. If he is going to, basically continue the development process, guys like, Dave Dickinson did and Bo Levi Mitchell did, and you go down the list, you've got to go through that development process. So I don't think anybody out there in the Canadian Football League was going to offer Jake Mayer a starting job. I just think that's unrealistic. So if you're Jake Mayer, you look at the situation here in Calgary, you can develop under a guy like Dave Dickinson. You've got a great relationship with Bo Levi Mitchell. John Hufnagel is part of the mix as well. Let's not forget, John Hufnagel was a great quarterback coach for the great Tom Brady back in 2003 when he was a Super Bowl MVP and then an offensive coordinator for the New York Giants. So, there's lots to learn for Jake Mayer. Will he be a great quarterback? Hey, we said the same thing about Nick Arbuckle. We don't know what Nick Arbuckle is right now. Edmonton is hoping they've got a great quarterback, but you're hearing lots of rumors that the Edmonton Elks may look, elsewhere, and there will be a Nick Arbuckle waiting in the wings again. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there.
A couple guys, remain unsigned. What do you think of a guy like Sean Lemon? Is that somebody you think that they're ready to move on from, or of the guys who are unsigned, who do you think is more likely to be back than not?
Yeah, Sean Lemon, great guy, getting a little older, and can he be replaced easily? I think with some of the players coming out of college or on your neg list, I think probably, hey, for the right price, I'm sure they would welcome Sean Lemon back. Let's not forget, they've got Derek Wiegand, they've got Mike Rose in the middle, they got Adiemi Berglund, on the end, they've got Flo Orimolade. They have high expectations for Flo. Hopefully he can stay healthy. So I don't think it's a necessity that you bring back Sean Lemon, but he's a good guy. As I said off the top, Louis, I really think the secondary now is the big focus. You've taken care of the quarterbacking situation. You've taken care of the offensive line. You're looking pretty good at the receiver position. You've got, your running back position done. Jameer Thurman back, but then, Trey Roberson is really the only guy back at this point in that secondary. I don't think Jameer Wall is going to come back. He's getting a little older. He was an unvaccinated player last year. John Hufnagel, like so many other, leaders in the Canadian Football League, are saying, hey, if you're not vaccinated, I'm not going to sign a player that's only going to play half the season and only play home games. So I think you're in a situation where I don't know what the status of Jameer Wall is. You've got Raheem Wilson, you've got Richard Leonard, you've got Jonathan Moxey. There's lots of pieces that still need to be signed in the secondary.
Do you feel, Calgary has been good. Hufnagel has obviously done so well with that team. Dave Dickinson, transitioning to head coach. Is there pressure in Calgary to get back to those winning ways, to get back to that potential dynasty, considering, Winnipeg is now trying to touch, is the it team in the league right now?
It's a great question. And obviously it's always about winning, and every organization will say the same thing. If you look back in history, when the Stampeders, went to Grey Cup after Grey Cup after Grey Cup and won in 2018, they were the dynasty. What they didn't do what Winnipeg did. They didn't win back-to-back. They had a chance to win 3 in a row, and they couldn't get it done. And then changes started to happen in 2018. There were some retirements. There was players moving on through free agency. 2019, there was even more changes, more retirements. So, really, you lose the 2020 season. You weren't sure what the Calgary Stampeders were going to be. And then 2021, you were a young team. It was it was the youngest team in the Canadian Football League. And, you didn't have a training camp, and you had all of these new faces. And that's one of the reasons why the Calgary Stampeders didn't start very strong, and they stumbled out of the gates. And there were a lot of people wondering, wow, is this year the Calgary Stampeders are not going to make the playoffs? Well, they did get it together. They played very, very well in the second half of the season. And, you're building something, but you're not there yet. Now, do they like their team? Do they think they can be competitive in the Canadian Football League this year? Yeah, I think they do. And I think, they're building something. So it's just a matter of whether or not they're going to be able to do that in 2022. I think everybody's looking forward to becoming a really normal season again. But let's not forget, the West is going to be interesting. You've got, Chris Jones back in Edmonton, and he's going to make that team better. Are they going to be good enough to make the playoffs? I don't know. The BC Lions, interesting with no Mike Riley. Nathan Rourke, I think, is a good young Canadian quarterback. It looks like they're going to have a great receiving core. The BC Lions are going to be tough. And then, of course, you've got the defending champions. Winnipeg is where everybody wants to be right now. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders is going to be tough, too. So I think it's going to be very interesting. But, hey, if I'm a betting man, I see the Calgary Stampeders being a playoff team again.
I want to do a little optimism, pessimism here. What is one thing to be encouraged about? Like you kind of pointed out, the young team that with a lot of core pieces coming back. But what's something that Stamps fans should be excited about, and maybe a question mark heading into the 2022?
I think the question mark will always be around Bo Levi Mitchell. Just how healthy is the shoulder? And again, he went through some more injuries. He has not been the same quarterback, that won that championship in 2018 and was the Grey Cup MVP. So that, if Bo Levi Mitchell can return to that form, then look out, then I think the rest of the Canadian Football League is on notice. If he can't, if he continues to, struggle with his arm strength, that could be an issue for the Stampeders. The offensive line is going to be there to protect him. He's got the pieces around him as far as the receivers go. He's got the running back, that can not only, block Kadeem Carey, he can also, obviously carry the rock. He can catch the ball coming out of the backfield. So Bo's got all the pieces. The question is, what Bo is going to be here in 2022. So I think that is the biggest question mark. I think ultimately, what fans are looking forward to is just how good is this defense going to be this year. The defensive line was very, very impressive. Maybe not the big names or the big stars that some of the other teams had, like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but they're building something here. And, Jameer Thurman, a lot of people have said he's one of the most underrated players in the Canadian Football League. He is only getting better. He's only 27 years old. He is a stud. What they're going to do at that middle linebacker position, it's a great question. I don't know yet, but, hey, there's a lot that can happen between now and the start of the CFL season.
That's well said. That's definitely true as well. Okay, so if we're looking at the free agency list, if John Hufnagel wants to make a splash, is there somebody you think that if he has the budget, if he has the money, that there's somebody out there or a position group out there that he might be able to make a big move on Tuesday?
Yeah, that's another really, really good question. How much money do they actually have left because they've had to give some players some raises. They've had to, renegotiate a few contracts like Bo Levi Mitchell. I'm not, John Hufnagel has never been that active, in the free agent market. If there is a need, he will go out and address that need. He did that, a couple of years ago when he signed Sean McEwen. Sean McEwen was a huge signing, as the center, the all-star center for the Calgary Stampeders. And, he did that a number of years ago with Josh Bell when he went out on the free agent market and signed Josh Bell. Hamilton fans will know John Hufnagel went out and signed Richard Leonard, as a free agent. That was, another important piece. So I don't think you're going to see John Hufnagel go out and get big name guys like a Sean McEwen, but he will look at what's available. And if there is a need, and right now I see the biggest need probably in the secondary, if he doesn't take care of his own house, that probably is where he's going to have to look at.
I'm sure a name like Cariel Brooks would have drawn a lot of interest in Calgary, or Tunde. I know Tunde has a history in Calgary, but guys, I'm sure that would have been interesting. But they're members of the Ticats. Jock, it should be fun to watch, like you say, right up until the season. Always great to check in with you. Thanks so much for doing this,
Louie. Anytime. You take care.